It is the 9th of August, 2022, and we are here with the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission for our monthly work session, where we are considering 3 items, all of them infrastructure related in some way. And so we'll begin with an Atlanta Highway Corridor project concept discussion, move into text amendments regarding flood protection, and then conclude with our FY23 live stream pipe and culvert rehabilitation and maintenance list. So, Manager Williams, would you like to introduce the first one?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mayor. And the first is the Atlanta Highway Corridor improvements, to talk to you a little bit about the concepts that the user group's been working on. Derek Doster's here to present.
Thank you. Good to see everybody tonight. Glad to bring some effort that we've been working on over since we brought to you the project concept last fall, and just want to give you an up-to-date where we're at on some of the corridor activities and some of the future work that we need to be doing as we move forward. In the package that was sent out, I will not intend to go through every slide tonight. There was 60-plus slides, so I'll just hit kind of the highlights and be happy to try to answer any questions. Again, this is the section of bike and pedestrian facility improvements along Mitchell Bridge and Timothy Road. Again, typical slides that we have for purpose and user groups, and a lot of history there. We'll stop right here and just, on September 7th last year, one of the activities that y'all under CDO asked us to take a look at, multi-use path, pedestrian sidewalks, and bridges on these 2 corridors. So that's really what the part of the effort that we're bringing to you tonight. And then also, we'll bring this back in a future consideration is the $1.5 million that you set aside for some additional activities, considering all some of the previous work that has been done. So that's a future presentation that we'll bring back to you. But for tonight, we'll just focus on the Mitchell Ridge Road and Timothy Road section. There's just an area map that shows existing conditions. You see the existing sidewalk on the north end of Mitchell Bridge Road that parallels the creek, and it's in between the road. We'll have some environmental concerns there. Again, the red area along Mitchell Bridge Road, there's no facilities. For a bike ped facility across the loop on Mitchell Bridge, we would need a new bridge. There's not any existing facilities on the current one. And then from there into Atlanta Highway proper it has existing sidewalks on both sides. And then again from Timothy Road, from Atlanta Highway down to about Skyline, there's sidewalks there in some places on both sides of the highway, and then the roadway in some places it meanders back and forth. Just a general overview there. They say pictures worth 1,000 words. These are some of the conditions along Mitchell Bridge that we would have to tackle. Of course, there's existing sidewalks on some areas with no sidewalks at all or any facilities. The Loop 10 bridge and approach is very narrow, and it's through that curve. It's very hard to retrofit that structure unless you put a new bike ped only on there or rebuild the entire structure. And then you have no facilities down to about 500 feet north of Ben Burton Park. And then there's that existing sidewalk that I mentioned a minute ago that just parallels the creek there all the way around to Tallahassee. Some of the considerations, again, how do we utilize some of our existing infrastructure? Some consideration would be to use what's there, of course, and then thinking about the loop. The connectivity across the loop, whether it be a standalone bike ped bridge or a joint project with Transportation and Public Works and redo that structure entirely, you could build back and put bike ped facilities on that structure. One of the things that's moving now is make orders through the MPO process. I believe the mayor had an opportunity to speak with the DOT commissioner, and he's asked to look at the Atlanta Highway, Mitchell Bridge Road, and Timothy Road as a planning effort, but wants it to go through the MPO process. So that's a future consideration that will be coming through, and that's moving through the MPO process, I believe, as we speak. And then just try to also utilize some existing cost savings to figure out how we could utilize the bridge over the river without having to build a standalone facility there or add on to that facility in a manner. Then when looking at it with bike ped facilities, the AIM plan, we went back, it's at the comfort level 4, which is not comfortable for cyclists. And then when you consider some of the also future projects like the Loop 10 Bridge or the Atlanta Highway interchange, some bike facility improvements may be better held to future considerations to allow some of those other things to mature. And so on here, we provided you drawings between the loop and that existing sidewalk just north of the park. And that distance is about 1.5 miles, and you just kind of see you see the loop, and then you see all the residential components that are north of that, and then the one subdivision and a little bit of duplex type structures on the south side of Mitchell Bridge. Just some engineering, some typical sections of what you, yes, sir.
Can you go back to that picture so I can understand what I'm seeing
Yes,
better? This is a path, this 1.5 miles path is on the top side, between those two stores?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the top side from where we're looking at of Mitchell Bridge?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it'd be on the north side, yes, ma'am. All right. And one of the things that y'all asked us to look at was from a north, as we look through conceptual type activity or conceptual drawings, look at the topography, how it may connect to, who's connecting to it. So we took a little deeper dive than normal conceptual drawings on these. And so you see the typical sections that we developed. There's several of them that are along through there. You can see the typical section 9. See, that's where we've we've shown that we could put an 8-foot shared use path along the bridge over the river by putting a physical barrier there and moving those travel lanes inward. So several type of configurations there that we'd have to take into consideration. From a plan sheet, this is starting the alignment designation there at Auburn Parkway. The loop is just to the left, and then this is a typical sheet that we put together. And so when you look at that and you walk the corridor and you look at topography and other utilities and all the factors that we look at, it was conducive to put in the path towards the back of the right of way there because of the shoulder slopes pulls off, and you want to at least maintain we always love to maintain as much separation between the travel lane and bike pedestrians as possible, but that's a flat area, or generally flatter there than in trying to build the shoulder up right next to the road, and that's just a typical drawing that we've shown. Just another typical component down. This is down near the curve. The apartment complex is on the top sheet. It's hard to see in this video, in the clip here, but what we're trying to show is there's an extensive topography challenge there, so we can't push it too far off the roadway. But also, if you can't push it far off the roadway, what other things do you have to contend with? And all that curve in there is super elevated back towards the north, so mainly it's pushing the road water to the top of the page. So we had to pick up curb and gutter, drainage, that type of material down through there, and that's a heavily steep slope that we'd have to pull back a significant retaining wall to handle. Dropping down to the next slide, again, this just shows the conceptual elements that we could put the Mitchell Bridge, put the shared use path on the bridge over the river. We necked it down to about an 8-foot shared use path there, and then we put in a 2-foot Jersey barrier type system, and then transfer the travel lanes over. Right now, we believe it would fit, and it would move traffic the way we need it to do. And then the bottom half of that page just takes you on up to the park. So that's kind of some general and a little bit of specifics about that corridor area. And from a construction cost standpoint, you can see from a shared use path, including a bridge, for the whole Atlanta Highway all the way to Tallahassee, conceptually we're estimating about $17.4 million. Of course, when you go to the sidewalk only side that you ask us to look at, reusing a lot of the same alignment, but then you remove, of course, the areas that already have an existing sidewalk, so you would have no cost there. And then we've also included a cost of the standalone bridge there as well. And so you would only, if you only wanted sidewalk, you could have that connectivity, excluding the bridge, for a little less than $5 million. And that, you'd make that corridor completely pedestrian friendly, again, excluding the bridge. But to do the shared use path, it takes a little bit more to get there. Yes, sir.
When you say excluding the bridge, so, I mean, there would be no way to actually walk safely across then without spending money on that bridge, right?
Correct. If
So, I guess I'm curious where that sidewalk only estimate doesn't include the bridge. The shared use path does include the bridge.
the bottom total at $8 million includes a bike pedestrian only bridge,
Okay.
including the 4.8 with the sidewalk.
So that's that loop bridge line item,
Where, oh.
3.16 million.
Yes.
Oh, okay, got it.
Okay.
Tim?
Yes.
Yes, see it now.
Derek, do we know what the lifespan of the loop bridge is that's currently there, when that might need to be replaced?
Steve, do you, or Ronnie, do y'all know?
Or even just a rough estimate? Just, I know it seems a bit older, but.
I can't remember when it was built.
Are we talking about the loop bridges?
The bridge over the loop, what, you remember
The
what
bridge
year it
over
was?
the, it wasn't that, it is not that old, I believe. However, we just got a word from GDOT there. We got their attention about the bottlenecking of pedestrians and bicyclists. So they're looking at it, and as you all know, we voted to apply for the bridge investment program for a grant, so they are aware of us applying for their own bridge because we want this connectivity. So we are in communication with GDOT, and we plan to apply for this grant and identify GDOT as a partner on this bridge. So that's the effort.
Okay.
Hope I answer your question.
Okay.
Kelly, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
And Derek, and this is just food for thought, and I don't know if GDOT would allow this or not, but, you know, in looking at the bridge and looking at the time it may take to do something with the bridge, you know, and there may, I don't know if there's this in other communities or not, but perhaps putting like pedestrian signals up before you get to the bridge, almost like a railroad crossing, like stop for pedestrians instead of stop for the train. But I don't know if they do that anywhere or not, and I don't know if the neighbors around there would want that or not. But you know, just something to think about as we're looking at this project, because the bridge is going to take some time.
Yeah.
And if there's something we can do to help pedestrians cross that bridge safely and easily, then maybe there's something out there. I'm not the expert, so maybe there's something out there y'all could think of.
Have to look at all opportunities that's there.
Derek, looking at the shared use path column, sort of the second to last number from the bottom before you get to the sum total, the $4.7 million existing sidewalk to Tallahassee Road, I guess that's between Ben Burton Park and Tallahassee Road. There's sort of that wider sidewalk. I mean, I know it's wider than a 5-foot sidewalk. And so
That's where we get into some technicalities, and what I mean by that is, you know, the separation that we typically want from a safety standpoint behind any curb. You know, we usually have a safety strip, whether it's 2 foot or a 3 foot grass strip. So that's technically what's there. It's about a 5 or 6 sidewalk plus that safety strip. So it makes it look, I'm not saying people don't walk on that section, but it makes it look a little wider than it technically is. And we even took some time to look at, you know, possibly what could we do on the other side of the road. Then you start looking at additional drainage, tying in with a DOT. You know, when you're talking about a shared use path, you know, preferably a 10-foot wide, so that's building a whole new lane. And then if you come back and drop, you know, do you move the curb line to get that separation that you want? So there's several considerations. It's a high estimate, but there's also, and again, at conceptual level, along that creek bank, if you built a retaining wall along that bank to widen it out, not only is it an earth retaining wall that we need to look at but the creek there, we want to make sure it's properly designed below what we call scour level to make sure the creek don't wash it out. So there's, I don't say it's elevated, I just want to say it's an expensive concept and something that we would continue to look at as we move forward, if that was the direction that we take. And then we also considered the fact that, you know, just like the bridge over the loop, there's a future project or a consideration for a concept. We also know that, you know, working with Transportation Public Works, there's the Tallahassee Road intersection tie-in, how all that may work or widen, or that intersection. So there's a lot of moving parts there. We just want to get to a point where y'all feel comfortable that what we're doing is moving forward properly with the dollars that we have, and not, and I don't want to say just forecasting the what-ifs, but we just want to be careful with that.
I appreciate that, and kind of thinking about this, and I'll grab Mike. When I worked out on the corner of Tallahassee and Mitchell Bridge, I'd often ride my bike to and from, kind of near downtown where I live, and would ride on that sidewalk with the kind of extra protection there in both directions. So if we were to think about sequencing and phasing this, you know, I might make a pitch for just kind of retaining the existing conditions there in the near term, and looking towards some of those other segments that are going to attach to neighborhoods and obviously get us safely over the loop too. So,
Yeah, and I think I would concur with that, Mayor, that it's important just to build the connectivity first and then go from there. I know, you know, in the Missing Middle report, they targeted this area as part of an area that could see some of the Missing Middle type activity, but it's not walkable. And they noticed that there's potential there for that. And I'll just say this, and this guy, right, Blaine's probably going to jump across here and choke me when I say this, but, you know, have we looked at, and maybe this body needs to consider, in some areas where we're trying to create the connectivity, should we not look at the materials being used in order to get to the price, in order to meet our budget? I mean, sometimes, you know, I know asphalt is not the ideal thing to use, and it does require a lot of maintenance, but it is a little bit cheaper than the concrete that we see today. The price is going through the roof, and asphalt's probably the same. So at some point, we have to have a discussion about what's more important to us. I mean, should we get that connectivity first, and then maybe at some point, future commissions may have to go back and fix what we've done. But I think people really want the connectivity these days, and how we can do that. I think we should look at it if materials help us do that. It may not. I don't know.
Well, you bring up a great point, and that was something that I think the Greenways Commission took up when they talked about the Greenway Network Plan, and trying to look at something other than just a 14-foot wide concrete path, which was our previous standard. And they did come up with other alternatives. And Derek, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the cost comes from a grading and stormwater perspective. I mean, if you had it all prepared and you just had to put concrete versus asphalt, you're right, there would be savings. But for a majority of the project, it's not just about the material difference. But we should look at those types of things. You're right, Commissioner, maintenance would be our concern. But trying to gain connectivity is very important.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as the mayor and Mike. You know, I don't want us to have the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's important to get a connectivity that can be used by all users. And I know the standard's a 10-foot path, but is it really necessary? I mean, I've done a lot of walking on Prince Avenue, and I've done some biking on Prince Avenue on the sidewalk, and it's what, I get about a 6-foot wide sidewalk. And I mean, it's not uncomfortable to share that space when it's not a crowded environment. And, you know, I don't anticipate this being a crowded environment. You know, cyclists tend to take care when they're not road cyclists who are, you know, all about going as fast as they can. But ones who are just generally trying to get where they need to go, they're going to take care and look out for pedestrians. So I'm all for, you know, going with a slightly narrower path, or utilizing the infrastructure that's there, and calling it mixed use, putting it in the proper signage, maybe widening it a little bit if necessary. But you know, I know that the grading and the earth moving and all that is the real expense. But if we can take advantage of what's there and go with a narrower path that will still get to where people need to go.
Well, Derek, I mean, is it AASHTO standards, you know, that govern the width of the path? What do we we're not just arbitrarily picking the width. I mean, we're looking to something for a safety margin.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you help us with that?
GDOT and ASH too, they take a look at a shared use path. And I know a lot of times, forgive me for a quick sidebar, but I know a lot of times we generalize terms, sidewalk, shared use path, multi-use trail, those kind of things. But in this setting, shared use path is the appropriate terminology. And the guidance and the guidelines there for shared use, pedestrians, and a bike facility, minimum is 8 foot, and we understand that they may be increasing that to the 10 foot. So that's what we went with. Now, if this body chose to, move it back to an 8 foot, and we could do that, of course, we'd gain some savings. How much, today, I couldn't tell you. Of course, a lot of that is in the grading and those types of things. We want to be careful with, where utilities are. A lot of times, people don't think about this, but a lot of times where we have utilities, or we know where, the power company trucks or the phone company trucks are going to pull off the side of the road and reach their transformers and those kind of things. We do try to take a look at that, and sometimes the concrete will take that abuse a little bit better than asphalt as well. But as far as if we want to have it as a shared use path, I think we need to be very careful, and the attorney's not here, and I would defer to him, but I think there is some definitions that we need to be careful on, or at least be conscious on, I should say, that if we want to purposefully put a bicycle on it, that we need to make sure it meets at least a minimum standard for those areas. And again, can people ride on the sidewalk? Yes, but I think we need to be careful as we move forward with the proper terminology, and traffic engineering, those guys, they'll have to support that in a manner if something ever did happen. So I just want to be conscious or share that with y'all. Yes, ma'am. Or I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and I definitely agree with utilizing what's already there, even if we go with the shared use path on the Tallahassee. But of course, that stretch is not complete though, as it kind of ends abruptly. It doesn't even get to Ben Burton. And then, of course, even while going through the parking lot of Ben Burton, there's not even a sidewalk to go from the entrance. I still remember a few years ago seeing somebody in a wheelchair trying to get off that sidewalk and down. It was terrible. So, I mean, are y'all able to break? I would hope that y'all have that cost broken down of what it would be connect that part to Ben Burton also, if we're going to go that direction that the mayor's talking about. So.
What you see there, from a shared use standpoint, from it's the third line, we call it the loop to the existing sidewalk north of Ben Burton Park. About 6.7 million is
So that's
that
including
mile and a
that park
half
over there? Okay.
that there's no facilities
Okay,
along
okay.
the north side.
Okay, gotcha. And I would also hope that if we're going to be doing that we would do some kind of connectivity actually into the park, which is kind of just non-existent now for pedestrians and cyclists unless you go down the driveway with cars.
One of the slides, we did show
Okay.
a connectivity down to where the new restroom facility is.
I'm just making an obvious point that when we do see this down the road too, I think we've done this before, is had the cost that shows the difference. It's just probably a multiplier, right, between the 8 and the 10 foot, and also the maintenance cost between the concrete and asphalt going out. By the time we actually get to this, it's going to be a different commission who don't have that experience with it, and having that all out there and thinking ahead, I think it's just going to be real important.
Yes, ma'am.
Jesse, did you follow?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted to, my back of the agenda, I guess, numbers here, but just to kind of, we're going to have to find some kind of way to pay for this. And if we're trying to find a way forward, and we're talking about multi-use, which is a great aspiration to have, I think we all understand that right now, the multi-use that exists is only on this 2-lane high-speed road with nothing but tall grass to wade through, or a very dangerous road to walk or bike along. And so it's, I think, better to have a sidewalk that's intended just for pedestrian use, but may happen to get used for other things more safely, that connects all the way, than it is to be building multi-use if the difference in timeline realistically is a generation or 10 years or whatever. And just to, if we go with just the sidewalk, the whole length of this Mitchell Bridge, and then including Timothy, which we've yet to get to, we'd be looking at 12.5 million. And the amount that we have in TSPLOST 2023 to carry us through to 2028 is 6.9. And so even if we are able to leverage, maybe we show that investment and we get a grant to help cover most or even all the cost of the bridge, that still leaves us 2.5 million short on just sidewalk. Never mind what cost escalations may happen in the coming years. So I just want us to think seriously, and this is not the only place in the county that needs a lot of investment. When we're trying to build out a network, I want to see a robust network of bike ped too, but we're trying to retrofit extremely dangerous auto-centric roads. My personal inclination, I do want to allow you to finish the presentation, but my personal inclination is to try to build the maximal amount of something that will last while we can. And in my mind, that's hitting those most crucial areas, including the extremely dangerous bridge with at least the sidewalk for now and maybe multi-use down the road. Another thing I'd love to see at some point is comparing this to potential greenway connections that have been contemplated but probably haven't been concepted out. So we may not have pricing on those, but just to kind of see, this came up a little while ago when we were talking about potential locations for transit facilities.
Coming from Beach Haven.
Yeah, if there's a way to connect people through somehow, maybe not along a roadway, but let's face it, people who are trying to get somewhere by foot or by bike probably prefer to be going through the woods or through the back of their neighborhood anyway. If we're only going to have a chance to build so much in the next decade or so, being thoughtful about where we connect to with what else is coming.
God, I hope it's not going to take a decade.
Realistically, we've got 5 years of this TSPLOST, and then, in 5 years, we have another TSPLOST, so maybe we try to round it out then. But
I think I remember hearing one of our staff members note that the 5-foot sidewalk standard allows for passage of 2 wheelchairs, so we probably have the opportunity to do that, a couple of us. All right, we've got another segment.
Yes, sir. And we'll keep moving
Something to
on.
look forward to.
Good
Thank you,
comments, thank you. And then we did, same thought process that on Timothy Road. Again, there's several different categories, if you would, general considerations, existing sidewalk on both sides, existing sidewalk on one where it crosses, no facilities at all. So you've got a variety of that type. Again, some of the user group considerations, utilize existing infrastructure. Again, the joint interest of GDOT with the interchange or the intersection Atlanta Highway. Looking at the AIM plan, what level of comfort's there, it's not comfortable for cyclists, So several considerations that we took there. We did take the opportunity, and we walked every one of these. So, it's not, we just didn't look at it from a high level. We put boots on the ground. We broke this corridor up into 3 different sections. There's basically from Academy down to Skyline. And then we developed 2 alternatives between Skyline and the Loop. And then you've got Timothy, the remainder of Timothy down to Macon Highway. The terrain, topography, existing utilities, those kind of things just brought us to the point that those seem like the reasonable alternatives to put forth. And you can see the mileage there in between. The difference between alignment A is all on the south side until you get to Timothy and the Loop, you cross over, and then you're on the north side of Timothy down to Macon Highway. And then alternate B from a bigger scheme is between the yellow star and the blue star, there's an alternative on the north side. That section of that corridor section could easily be utilized for either shared use path. And again, we looked at these as shared use path, knowing that we could always make it a little bit narrower, tried to focus that thought process as we move forward. And again, sometimes it's not right next to the edge of the road or right next to the sidewalk because of topography or trying to get that separation for bike pedestrians. So we try to move that forward in that line of thinking. Again, typical sections, again, there's several pages of those, just trying to educate, if that's the right best word, to let you know what all the considerations had to go into this. Again, just a couple sample slides of the conceptual type plans. This would be remove and replace from basically Academy, going across Epps Bridge Parkway, just tying into some of the existing facility there and moving across that, possibly doing some additional striping to make it a little bit clearer. Then we move down, and of course you see Skyline there, and that brings us to kind of the A and B change, but the rest of these slides is the alternate A along the south side. Again, just general type construction along the side of the road where you can, where it best fits. Lots of storm drain that we need to take care of. Extremely wide right of way there that we get to utilize. This was I say an anomaly down that Thomas Walk, or Towns Walk, I'm sorry, down there. They have that turn lane, the right-hand turn lane. So we get to, one of the benefits of having that turn lane there is we get to utilize that turn lane as space separator from the travel lane. So we can put the facility kind of right next to the sidewalk, or the curb and gutter, I'm sorry, and maintain most of those people's front yard the way it exists there. Then we shoot on down, and then you can see the crosswalk design that moves us through that signalized intersection to the north side of Timothy, down in front of the church. And we stay on that side of the road, and we shoot down to the subdivision, and then we continue on the north side and just try to end up at logical termini down at the existing development down there on Macon Highway. So it's kind of an end of alignment A. Alignment B, we pick up at Skyline. It's just to the left. There's an existing crosswalk where that sidewalk is, and then we cross over, and we just follow the north side of the highway. I keep saying highway. North side of the roadway down. So this is just a typical north side section. Down and cross, that's in front of the Unitarian Universalist Church. You can see their parking lot and their facilities. Again, and then we just continue to move on down the north side to where Timothy ties in at the red light is off the page, but it just follows more in a linear fashion in the old right-of-way of the old Timothy Road, and then we connect back up right there in front of Timothy Baptist, and it's the same alignment as we just showed you. And so moving that, those conceptual ideas through our costing estimates. If you did a true south shared use path, from what was shown, you end up with about a $9.2 million cost estimate. And then if you do a sidewalk only, you're at about $4.5 million. And again, tying into some of the existing facilities that you have.
So am I correct that these totals include completing the facilities on both sides of the street on Timothy?
No, sir. It would complete,
Or is it
it would complete a linear path
a linear
on
path,
one
but,
side
yeah, only
only.
on one side, yeah, so there's, okay. Sorry, I lost you when you conveyed that, I think, quite clearly earlier on. So there's one way, there's one side at any given point of the road. It just switches which side it's on.
And when we walked it, we tried to take in consideration, again, vertical curvature of the road, what's coming into that, sight distances, those kind of things that we tried to kind of capture as we walked through to try to make sure we understood what the implications may or may not be.
Patrick?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that I don't think from a safety issue, I'm not a big fan of when sidewalks cross busy roads. So just for edification for my colleagues, it just poses a danger for drivers and for walkers where a driver may not see. So just want to put that out there.
Derek, are there some mitigations that you'd anticipate where the segment might move from the north side to the south side?
But possibly, yes, sir. It's one of the things, again, this is informational tonight, and we want to take this to the public, kind of get their opinion of where they may not kind of to work their way, how they would use this corridor and the other corridor. We've kicked around some ideas on some traffic calming activities in certain locations. Of course, we can't stop traffic or don't want to. That makes it just more dangerous. Certainly, either, red lights take warrants and those kind of things. So we don't believe that there's some drastic measures that we can take, but we believe that we can improve some of the signage and visibility in some of those areas to make it as safe as possible.
Carol?
I'm looking at the next slide in here, and so this is the revenue slide here, and it shows the TSPLOST 2018. And you may have covered this at some point, but are we, like on the 2023, there's another $8 million for Atlanta Highway, Broad Street. What is the process? Are we going to, is that going to be a completely different user group? Is that going to be an extension of this? I think that was the, are we considering that money? And whether, just as a reminder, are there other projects that the user group has prioritized as well for these buckets of money?
I'm going to answer the last one first. The part of your charge that you gave us last time was to, identify, some conceptual stuff along Timothy and Mitchell Bridge, which we're presenting. We also have some additional work to do about some alternative projects or additional projects, I should say, along the corridor that you've asked us to do. The user group will be taking those up. As far as the 2023 program, there's several buckets of money or identified projects that are either bucket type or are project specific. Again, while the referendum is passed, I think additional efforts are being made to finalize tiering schedules. I'll defer to the manager and the mayor on some of those questions on how they'll move forward. Again, how the user group may interact, carry over like they have in some projects. In some projects, it behooves us to move forward with a different set of eyes and ears, if you would. And so I would defer some of those future questions because I don't know exactly where they may land.
And just with TSPLOST 23 broadly, we've got a couple of steps that we'll be going through over the next couple of months. One is just identifying the program management team that'll be taking care of TSPLOST 2023. And then immediately beyond that, doing that tiering exercise where we look at kind of the next 5 years and how we're going to sequence those dollars. Blaine, is there anything you'd add?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And just one more. You said program management, and of course, with the last SPLOST 2020, that was brought in-house, and Robert Cheshire, our capital projects director, will provide the program management. The process that you're referring to would be for the project managers. With each new TSPLOST or SPLOST, we'll go through a competitive selection process to make sure that we're getting good value and experience with project administration. And yes, the tiering is the next big milestone for, all the projects and over the 5 years, how we project those to be spent. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll just make one comment, and thank you, Derek, for this. This is very, very helpful in getting some sort of grasp on it, and I look forward to the public comment that are some of the next steps, I believe. But I will say this, what we're looking at here, not only impacts the approximately probably 10,000 households that live on Mitchell Bridge and Timothy Road, but the way it could connect, again, all of really, you could take a walk from Kingswood, go down Mitchell Bridge Road, maybe have to walk through grass in a few spots, but you can get all the way downtown in order to do that, and also then from there all the way over to Patrick's house if you wanted to. So it really does more than just connect Athens and Timothy to Atlanta Highway. It's connecting Athens, and I think I can see a lot of possibilities for some activities and stuff with this sort of pedestrian activity along here. So thank you for looking at this, and I hope when we go discuss this in the tiering that we take all of that into account. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just something I wanted to raise up, because you brought this up, Carol, with the 23 project having an Atlanta Highway project and a Timothy Mitchell Bridge. I mean, what we ran into at the TSPLOST 2018 is the Atlanta Highway project essentially became the Timothy Road Mitchell Bridge project. And my understanding with the TSPLOST 2023 list and the way that, when we were mapping that out, was to create a clear distinction between what is now a designated project for Mitchell Bridge and Timothy Road, and then a designated project that is Atlanta Highway and West Broad. I mean, there's a massive underinvestment along the main corridor that these two roads are connecting into. And if we build robust facilities along these two roads and still have nothing but dangerous gaps and muddy paths for people to walk along on Atlanta Highway, then what are we really achieving? So I really hope that when we're thinking about tiering and moving forward and how to use these funds, that we don't continue to dip into Atlanta Highway corridor funds for these two roads. I'm glad that we're finding a way forward to prioritize these two roads as well. I see value in that for sure. We've heard from no shortage of people who live along these corridors who feel the same way. But there is certainly no shortage of people who live and work, or ideally, in the future might visit and not constantly have to drive through the ever more congested traffic along Atlanta Highway, who have no public transportation options, often very limited means, and have a very dangerous corridor to try to walk down. And even if they're not showing up in a public input survey, you just have to walk down the road and see them, vote with their feet, as they like to say, with the muddy paths, to know that that's being used. So.
Carol?
And I would apologize, I kind of, despite everything we went through with TSPLOST, kind of forgot about the Timothy Mitchell Bridge bucket as well. I just think those are all, as we're going through this in the fall with the public input, important to keep in mind. And though I love the marathon walk around town, I think also the marathon, the real transportation in terms of everyday life. It's rare that someone is going to be down at Unitarian Fellowship in that area, will walk all the way down, but they will jump on a bike, and that's very, that changes everything. And as someone who uses a bike, again, commuting around, that corridor is a place that if I had a doctor's appointment or needed to go out to Academy Sports for something, that's when I use my car, because I can't get there. So just some thoughts, and that's all I have.
Mayor, do you mind if I say something?
No, go right ahead.
So the point is about connecting, and that's the whole point about Athens in Motion, I hope, is finding ways to connect people to people and people to neighborhoods and neighborhoods to other neighborhoods. And this is what this project would do. It's not taken away from the Atlanta Highway at all. Atlanta Highway is going to be all right. Atlanta Highway is going to be all right because we have a TAD in place now that Commissioner Gould and I are part of, as long with the mayor. So a lot of stuff will be taken care of there. There's development going along Atlanta Highway. I just rode by the one that's happening where, I never can say this right, Lidl, is that the right way? Lidl is happening right now. They're going to be putting a sidewalk in front of Lidl right now. The development along right in front of Omni Club, they just recently, a couple months ago, put up another sidewalk extension. So we had the money in TSPLOST to address these sidewalk gaps, but this is more than a sidewalk gap. This is a way for people in this area along Timothy and along Mitchell Bridge Road to be able to do the things that you're able to do, to be able to do the things that people in Cobham and Five Points and Boulevard are able to do, and East Side. So we're trying to look at that, and I hope we will look at that. So thank you.
Just another quick slide, and I'll wrap it up, and then any further questions. Just to let you know that we do plan to host 2 public input sessions in person. So we can roll the plans out and let people talk and let them see how things connect, or, where you live. And then we'll have the online survey and comment period starting in August 22nd, and then have it open for about a month. And then we'll be able to take that, glean through all that information that we have, take it back to the user group, and be able to come back with hopefully as a a prioritization or a recommendation for a concept. And again, we realize there's a lot of needs and some limited funds, but we'll provide an idea of what the public shares with us too, y'all, like we always do, and then move to, hopefully an October, November cycle. And then for this section only, again, would be to start the preliminary plans that you ask us to move forward with. And we still have some additional work, remember, along the Atlanta Highway Corridor, the money that you set aside from last September's vote to say you wanted to study some additional activity. So we'll bring that back on a separate note, though.
Jesse, follow up.
Yeah, just my last thought on this. A lot of times when we get public input, it's not super clear to people what's financially feasible based on how we're typically allocating resources. And so I just hope, there's probably limits to how much that can be conveyed, but maybe there's some way to convey to people when they're participating what the budget limits are. Because, we're probably going to hear is that people want multi-use everywhere. I mean, I want multi-use everywhere. I think we all want multi-use everywhere. But I just want us to be realistic about what we're conveying to the public, to the community. If we're looking at a cost that's more than twice as much, I have a hard time understanding how we're planning to pay to complete that whole project and do much of anything else, unless people are aware of funding sources that I'm not, or maybe the infrastructure money that's coming from the federal government will be a godsend and help us get there all of a sudden. But I'm cautious about us conveying an expectation that robust multi-use path can be built along this entire corridor, and then painting ourselves into a corner where we've got more than a decade till we can even possibly see that through with the funding we've got. So that's just a thing I want to share with colleagues here. I think we should.
Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I think building on top of that a little bit, just looking at because I definitely, when I looked over this before the meeting, I was like, how are we going to pay for this? Adding up the shared use path, we add up both segments, that's just under $27 million. And if you add up, the TSPLOST 2018 plus 23 that we've kind of put towards this, it's a little over 9. We can dip into other places, but other places definitely also have needs. Atlanta Highway is more than just, like Stonehenge and other places that are further down, like those places deserve connectivity also. I know West Broad has had money moved away from it at times in the past too, so there's like a lot of stuff around there. And so I guess I think it'd be helpful if somewhere, I don't know if we've done any kind of pedestrian traffic studies or just basically to try to really nail down where the greatest need is in these different projects. Because to me, it looks like either we're gonna have to get, and I hope we do get some grant money to be able to pull this whole thing off. But if we don't, we're gonna have to really kind of prioritize a little bit about which ones we're gonna be funding. And I think that information about the greatest need, the greatest safety issues possibly could help inform that public comment and the discussion further, because I think right now, I'm just looking at these dollar signs and they're just not adding up, so, yeah.
More to come. Carol?
One quick final comment. If we could get any information from our Transportation Public Works and Daniel Sizemore, the Bike Pedestrian Coordinator, about potential federal grants. It's just that I know that there's a lot of money now available with our Department of Transportation with the present federal administration. So we are probably way ahead of the game in terms of being ready for some of that. And so I'd like to know what's there as we're planning as well. Thank you.
All right, we're moving on from
Thank you.
paths to floods.
Unwanted waterways.
And as Todd comes up, Mayor, if I might, just share that this is not a complicated thing, but we know that homeowners and property owners are very interested in stormwater. There's a lot going on there as we look to the future. And these affect folks. And so we wanted to present this in public so everybody understood and had the opportunity to learn from this.
Well, good evening. I'm here to talk about our flood protection ordinance. A lot of people have heard of the FEMA flood maps. A lot of people have heard about flood insurance. What ties the two together here in Athens-Clarke County is our Chapter 8.2. The ordinance has to do with flood prevention, flood avoidance. It could be thought of as a flood resilience ordinance. The idea is to minimize construction of new buildings in flood-mapped areas. There are parts of flood-mapped areas where buildings can be constructed, but they have to be safely elevated, along with their mechanical utilities like HVAC. So, to be able to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, Athens-Clarke County has to have a flood protection ordinance. You can see the benefits here of participating, the most common of which is residents purchasing flood insurance, federally backed flood insurance. From time to time, the ordinance needs to be updated. FEMA is updating their maps, and they are telling us that we need to update Chapter 8.2 along with that. The ordinance revisions are mandated by FEMA and all appear to be minor housekeeping items. And just an aside here, or a note, federally backed flood insurance does not mean federally subsidized flood insurance. It just means that all property owners have access to flood insurance at rates designated through FEMA. Before the National Flood Insurance Act was enacted in 1968 and flood maps were initially created in the 1970s, it was actually very difficult to even purchase flood insurance. Every time the maps have been updated, we've revised Chapter 8.2. The Georgia Emergency Management Agency has advised us of the specific changes we need to make. These revisions will be brought to you for your approval at the next regular meeting. That adoption allows Athens-Clarke County to continue to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. So changing the flood maps is a carefully prescribed federal process with timelines, and we are currently down near the end of that timeline. In the middle of the pandemic, there were virtual open house meetings. Even though FEMA is the agency that changes the maps, we in Athens-Clarke County are responsible for informing property owners of those changes. We've taken that responsibility seriously. The Stormwater Division of Transportation and Public Works coordinated with the Public Information Office to publicize these meetings. You'll notice that the only required announcement is in the community newspaper. I'll go over our notification process for the open house meetings in just a second. Oh, I think I got ahead of us. All right. So, and this is just a quick overview of which streams and rivers were changed, both the Middle and North Oconee rivers, along with McNutt Creek, several smaller streams, Sandy Creek and others draining into those waterways. So not everything, but the major waterways are being changed by FEMA. Yes?
If you don't mind, could you distinguish between the two images real quickly at a high level? What is one versus the other?
So it seems like we're seeing double there, doesn't it? And I will admit I stole these slides from the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and the way they did this on the left side has different information than on the right side, but the left side has the new maps. The red ones are have the elevations associated with those flood maps, and the yellow ones, it's new mapping, but it doesn't have the elevations associated with them. And on the right side, it's just kind of the engineering methods. When they say regression equations, that's how they come up with the flows that are used to model these flood maps, basically. And basically, they're saying they use regression equations on all of the streams that were redone there. And the hydraulics are saying HEC-RAS. That's a popular program to do, to convert those flow rates into the elevations. So, all right.
Todd, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
The white spot above Winterville, what is that?
Is that where the Broad River watershed begins?
Is that,
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure why that is like that, because it looks like it's outside of Athens-Clarke County. Yeah.
I think the northeast is the Broad River watershed versus the
Yeah, I
bulk of the
think-
county that's the Oconee.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case.
It makes sense, because you see the headwaters of several streams right at the demarcation.
Yeah. Most of Athens-Clarke County does go into the Oconee, but part of it goes the other way and ends up in the Savannah, weirdly enough. All right. This is just what a typical flood map looks like. This happens to be the middle Oconee River at the loop on the south side. If someone owns a building in a flood mapped area and they have federally backed mortgage, they are required to purchase flood insurance. So the FEMA flood maps are associated with flood insurance. And just for your information, anyone can purchase federally backed flood insurance, whether they are in a FEMA flood mapped area or not. You can live at the top of a mountain and purchase flood insurance if you want to. Property owners are only required to purchase flood insurance if they are in a flood mapped area and have a federally backed mortgage. So why is FEMA updating the maps? The main reason is that better topographic data is available than before, so the new maps are they're just more accurate. And they kind of give some numbers up at the upper left side, kind of, when they say effective study, that's kind of what we're using now, 8 foot plus or minus vertical accuracy, 33 foot plus or minus horizontal, and then we're going to something that's much better than that with the new LiDAR mapping. So it's an improvement in the mapping, and that's why they continually update the maps. So these are the draft results, and what we can see here is that about 25 were added to the special flood hazard area, and over 100 were removed. And actually, as we went through this process, I think it's closer to just 20 that were added, because we saw some that were added that really shouldn't have been added. There were also some buildings that were already in a flood mapped area, and the flood elevation had gone up as a result of the new mapping. So we focused our notification efforts on the people who were newly added, along with those for whom the flooding elevation had increased. So those two were the groups that we thought we should make a special effort to notify.
Well, Todd, if I might too,
Yes.
anecdotally, my experience in the past when we had flood map revisions is generally you just end up including more and more structures as they revise that. But I just want to draw a point that Todd's already mentioned, that with the increased accuracy of the mapping, we're actually removing some flood structures out of the flood zone. Is that right?
That is correct, and we always want to make sure that that's the right thing to do, and we did question the mapping, the consultant who did the mapping, quite closely about all of the changes that we saw to make sure that they were sure that these were the right changes, and they went back and double-checked and sometimes triple-checked to make sure that that what they were doing was accurate. So it is good news in that sense that more were removed than were added. Yes.
On that specifically, because you were speaking of like the structures, people in the structures being
Yeah.
added in, we are contacted to let them know. Would we be contacting the folks who have their structures being removed?
Well, there was a general notification. My understanding, and I've asked this question, is that they will be contacted, and they may already have been. Well, the maps aren't effective yet until September 15th, but my understanding is they will be contacted by their lenders.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because I would imagine there could be some positive, some good changes
Yes,
for them. So
yes. And of course, they may very want to continue with their flood insurance, even if they're removed. They can probably get a better rate, a preferred risk as opposed to high hazard. That's what the advantage would be for them. So, we had the required notification that we had to do, and that was in the newspaper. We did that a couple times. You know, who's going to see that? Some people are going to see that, but not all that many. So we did these postcards also. This was the front side, and we sent these to everyone who was newly added or for whom the flood elevation was increasing, and then this was the back side of it. And what we're trying to do is let people know about these virtual open house meetings. And they were scheduled so that residents could get their flood mapping questions answered. The Public Information Office created a website just for this and posted social media notifications as well. We also, I went with someone else, went door to door for the people who were newly added to the flood mapped areas. So we felt pretty good about our notification effort. I have seen cases in other communities where FEMA maps were updated and residents who were most affected by those changes were puzzled when their bank informed them of the need to purchase flood insurance, or they sold the property, because that's usually when it happens. So we wanted to make sure that didn't happen here, that everyone knew what was going on. So, and these meetings actually I thought went quite well. We had someone there from the state, Georgia, Department of Natural Resources, GEMA. We had somewhere from the modeling agency. Dewberry was the consultant. We had someone there from FEMA, and usually someone from our office was there as well. I thought those meetings went really great. There were maybe 10 of those meetings that were set up. So I felt good about that entire property owner notification process. All right, this is something that is just informational only, and it's just a timing coincidence because as it happens, FEMA is implementing a new flood insurance rate methodology right now at the same time that our maps are changing. And the reason they're doing that, it's a good reason, is that flood insurance was never actually intended to be subsidized. The problem with subsidized flood insurance is that it can encourage building in flood-prone areas, which is, defeats the purpose of community resilience. So Risk 2.0 is moving in the direction of so-called actuarial rates. We don't know specifically how it is affecting flood insurance rates here in Athens-Clarke County, but we have reason to believe that there won't be much of a change. And the reason is that the rates here are probably pretty realistic already. Where the rates have been unrealistically low has been in coastal areas, and we don't have a coast. So it's supposed to be more fair than the previous system. I'm sure it's not perfect by any means, but it does seem to be a step in the right direction. So if you hear about Risk Rating 2.0, that's just how FEMA is doing their new flood insurance rate methodology. It's generally a good thing, but some people, especially in coastal areas, are not super happy about it. All right, we're going to end where we started. These are the advantages we have if we continue to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which I would highly recommend. Get the new maps, and we have these benefits here. Residents can purchase federally backed flood insurance, and if there is a presidential declared disaster, we have access to disaster assistance funds. So, does anyone have any questions? Just anything at all. I brought along Bob Fawcett, our floodplain administrator, because I was, so concerned that we would be inundated by questions. Oh, there we go.
I just had one thought, I guess, actually, and I feel like you covered this really well, and I really admire the robust outreach that you all did, going door to door. Nothing beats it. So kudos for that. Just following up on what Commissioner Denson raised up, it's rare that people are eager to let you know when you don't need to be paying for something anymore. And so feel like it might be good for us to just send a postcard to the 105 residents. I mean, can't be too much staff time, hopefully, and, you know, it's less than $100 in postage, but I feel like that'd be worthwhile just to kind of do right by
Yeah,
our residents
I
to let
think
them
we could-
know.
We could probably swing that.
I would like to say, so insurance is a risk proposition, right? So I would think that we'd be very careful about how we worded that. We wouldn't tell people they shouldn't buy it. It's that you're not required to, but you would want to consider with your family and any other professionals what your level of risk is, that type of thing. So,
Totally.
sorry, I just want to say that for the public's benefit.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Might not even be bad to say we might encourage you to keep it, but just, you know.
I might
But they have an
also
option.
mention
Yeah, to let them
that
know they're no longer legally required. We might be the only ones who let them know that.
the risk that is depicted on these maps is FEMA's best estimation of the current risk. And we don't know what that risk is going to be 20 years, 30 years from now. But their maps are not based on 20 years, 30 years from now. They're based on what they feel it is right now. Yes.
I just kind of found the answer here, but there was something on your PowerPoint about was there something about which zones have to get flood insurance?
Mhm.
I guess, and then I was looking up the address that I lived in for 30 years, which was on the river, and right now it's not I guess it's above, must be above, even though the river was just right there, of AE and AE, zone AE, there. But of course, I bought that house like in 1987, but I remember trying to get flood insurance and being told I couldn't get it. But that
Oh,
might be-
so that's just wrong. I mean,
that must be history now.
well, everyone, all of, the lenders they're supposed to, insurance companies, they're federally mandated to offer flood insurance. That's my understanding. Is that, Bob is nodding, yes.
Was that true in 1987?
It should have been, yes.
Okay,
Yes, so they told you wrong.
okay, because it was sort of like you're not exactly down there. You can get it if you're in there, and you're like, why would you build in there?
Anyone should be
Okay.
able to get federally backed flood
Okay,
insurance.
got it, thank you.
And of course, a lot of flood damage does happen outside of the flood mapped areas. That's a very important point to make as well. All right.
Everybody ready to continue with the aquatic theme with our final presentation?
Is that what it is?
That's where we are.
Overtones of climate change.
From here on out.
Oh, this is your favorite.
I love these. I love it. I love a stormwater pipe.
There you go. Oh, this is Woody. That's right. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I took that picture. Oh, I reached out to Robbie Hooker. He'll connect with us when he's installed. We're still in potential swamps. It's good. He was on the cow lane today. This neighborhood meeting. And is he interested in it? Jesse.
Actually,
Oh, Carol.
Oh, yeah. Towards me.
yeah, I put it on the side, I just couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I just thought maybe you heard too much. Okay.
I was talking quality, that's right.
Yeah.
We had a neighborhood meeting yesterday.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He was there.
Okay.
Yeah. Primarily because of exactly.
I can't find the
issuances that honestly, appropriate to this any service that would be provided. One of the most important is I can get his whole
Okay.
reflecting, give us some feedback.
Well, he was actually asking about the bridge as well. No, the bridge.
Oh, yeah, because the system. They got rid of it too. Focus on the stormwater.
We go here.
Good evening. My name is Jason Jones. I'm here representing the Transportation and Public Works Department, and we are here to discuss a stormwater-related topic, our live stream pipe replacement and culvert replacement program. And I'm thankful to our department leadership, Stephen and Ronnie, for letting me come and speak on this to you all. So the goal with this presentation is to present to you all an update of our program, some progress that's been made since the last time you would have been seeing some of this information. And we'd also like to discuss some culvert replacements as well as rehabilitation, which is kind of another option we have in our toolbox when we're addressing some of these issues. We're going to look at kind of an outlook of the program's budget and discuss the deficit list as that is related to that. So to start out with some of the program's history, as I mentioned last time, this would have been presented to you all was in 2020. September 2020, the Mayor and Commission approved a list of 55 projects. The concepts were approved as part of the LSPR 2020 program. Since then, 12 of those 55 projects have been fully replaced. Those projects, construction have been completed, and were actually all completed by our in-house streets and drainage division within our department. In the table on the right-hand side, you'll see those 12 projects listed out with two different columns for costs. The red column is showing the conceptual cost estimates that were put together if those projects were to be completed by a contractor and if they were to be fully replaced. And the green column, the second price column, shows the actual cost of what was expended to complete those construction projects. You'll be able to see there was a significant savings, largely due to being able to complete those with our in-house forces. So those costs in green represent labor and the materials for those projects. Some other things that have happened since 2020, staff have identified three additional culverts that are failing and are in need of being added to this program. And just another note on our Streets and Drainage Division, our in-house construction crews, their kind of realm of operation for these projects is any culvert with a diameter of 60 inches or less, and any culvert that has less than 10 feet of backfill. So if it's deeper than 10 feet beneath the road or larger than 60 inches in diameter, the scope of that construction is going to require some outside contractor help. Here is our list with those 12 completed projects removed, and the 3 new projects have been added. So this is what we're looking at currently. Our program has 45 project locations, 45 project culverts. The project estimate is at $26.9 million, and again, we like to make it clear to you all that it's a deficit. This is not regular maintenance needs. These are locations. These culverts have failed or are failing. They have reached or are very near the end of their serviceable life. And that's why this program exists, is to address those needs. So with continuous inspections and frequent monitoring of these locations, we are constantly evaluating them, giving them scores based off of some different structural aspects that we evaluate when we go out to look at them. They've been prioritized based off of the worst scores, moving down through until the slightly better ones. And I've also added some blue triangles there for some of the projects remaining. There's not very many of them left that we feel can have potential to be constructed by our Streets and Drainage Division. So a majority of the projects remaining are going to call for more expensive replacement if they were to be done by a contractor.
Patrick, you had a question?
Yeah, so on your previous slide, you were saying if it's 60-inch diameter or less, and if it's 10 feet, we have to contract it out. Is it because of
Other way around. So if it's larger than 60 inches in diameter, it would be a very larger project. It would be contracted out. Or if it's deeper than 10 feet beneath the road, likewise, it would be a larger construction and would kind of.
So we contracted out because of just our skilled labor, we don't have the equipment.
The equipment, and it is a more specialized construction process when you get into those larger pipe sizes and larger projects. Different site constraints can dictate if that can be done by our in-house crews. And again, these projects are done outside of the regular maintenance that our in-house crews do perform.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of spitballing here, the manager, what would it take for us to bring on staff and equipment to be able to tackle more of these in-house?
Well, and my knee-jerk reaction, there's just some safety considerations to stabilize and cuts that deep. But we can talk, I can give you a better answer on that if you give me some time with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I'd kind of rather see local employees taking on this work and, knowing that they'll be getting fair wages from the local government and knowing that, the profits aren't going to executives and shareholders. I would like to see some numbers on what it would take for us to be able to do more of this in-house.
And I'll ask, I won't put Jason on the spot, but maybe Steven, the 250,000, the green number, is that fully burdened with the staff time as well, or okay, all right. And if you could, Jason, if we've answered your question, Commissioner Link, if we could go to the list of the projects. And I just want to offer this to y'all. So several years ago, when the live stream replacement program was first initiated, the estimate then was roughly $22 million. And since then, I think y'all have done a lot of refinement and reanalysis, so this is the latest and greatest. At the time, that commission, one of the questions we asked was, well, how do you want to pay for this? Because the utility does not generate enough funds to tackle the sizable. And at the time, the commission said, well, we gave them several options to consider, and they said, well, of 22 million, 11 million should go to SPLOST, the upcoming SPLOST, and 11 million we would look to, when we revisit the utility and the rate structure, that might carry some of the burden, which means an increase there. Subsequent to that, the amount that was approved in SPLOST 2020 was $500,000. As you can see, this has grown slightly to include more. And one of the, I think the follow-ons that you might mention is where we are with our resident advisory committee with respect to the stormwater utility. But I just want to put that into context for you that, these are really, and we'll talk about the rehab, I think, which is very instrumental. Thank goodness, though, that we'd had a fund balance in our utility along with some additional funds that the commission programmed from previous SPLOST to kind of create a bridge to the TSPLOST. So I just want to remind you, all the stuff's interconnected, and this is pretty critical infrastructure.
But, without that balance that we accumulated, Athena Drive, Cedar Creek, and Barber Street would not have gotten done.
Yes, the Barber Street culvert alone, that was an emergency fix. That was $1 million fix. So over the last 24 months, we probably had, 6 to 10 emergency failures, I would say, totaling several $1 million. And thank goodness we did have some funds on hand, but that's where it ran short. So,
Patrick and then Jesse.
So there's a lot of F and C's on this thing. So when it says failed, like it's bad, it needs to be replaced now.
Yeah, the failed, critical, and poor is sort of a qualitative categorization that we link to the evaluation score. So any score that's greater than 4, we say it's failed. Doesn't necessarily mean the roadway has failed, but the culvert at that location has reached, it's beyond its serviceable life. The bottom may be completely rusted out. It may be showing signs that it's structurally it's buckling perhaps. And it's kind of a qualitative measure just to help us with the prioritization.
And is there like a contingency plan to, just in case that one bad rain, that we have the funding for at least some of these to replace them?
The farther along in the program we get, we feel more and more confident as time goes on that we have a solid grasp and understanding of which locations are sort of right on the brink, and we do monitor those more frequently than others. And we do have, the enterprise funds and other funding sources that we'll get into later, that we do have some money in our pocket that could be expended if needed, if that failure does arise, as has happened in the past.
And Jason, I don't mean to hijack your presentation. So a good case in point is Athena Drive. So staff's monitoring it, looks like everything's going to be okay for a few years, and then a rain event happens, and then we see a sinking in the pavement, telltale sign, all of a sudden that jumps to the forefront.
And this is for Mayor and Blaine. Last question. When we look at federal dollars for roads, does that include or could include culverts as well? Okay.
Yes, we'll have more about that in the presentation as well.
Good question, though.
Is there another question at this point?
Okay, Jesse can go for it, yeah.
Jesse then too.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, we have 3.5 million in the TSPLOST, and if my back of the napkin math is right here, it looks like y'all were able to very impressively come in at 15% of the estimated cost, which is a huge reduction in the overall estimated cost of those projects. I hear you that there's a safety concern, so I don't want to look over that, and maybe that makes all this a non-starter, but speaking to Commissioner Link's point, if there is a way to bring this in-house, knowing sooner than later when we're discussing the TSPLOST project hearing, I imagine there would be a lot of upfront costs for machinery that we might do well to get in the door, like use that funding to get in the door to then maybe be able to achieve these things for a much lower price.
Well, and this is something that was done with Clayton, by the way. When we first started that process, bid it out, all the underground was part of the bid, and it came in insanely high. And the commission approved the creation of a stormwater crew to help offset that. And I tell you that to say, Commissioner Houle, that it is an eligible expense to bill staff time for TSPLOST funds for certain projects, and certainly equipment and materials would be eligible as well. So we will follow up on y'all's inquiry with staff about the feasibility of in-house on larger, more complex projects.
I'll hold off till we get to the future program snapshot, my questions. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so up till now, we've been talking about replacement mostly, and the next couple slides are specifically speaking to rehabilitation. So as I mentioned, this is another tool we have at our disposal to use from time to time when it could be a good time to use it. So with 45 projects left on the list, many of them outside the scope of our in-house capabilities, many of them large diameter pipes, perhaps spanning very long distances, the prices will be quite high for a full replacement. So staff have been looking at some other options for extending the serviceable life of these locations, of these culverts, and avoiding emergency failures. So with rehabilitation, it's not just one thing. There's many different maintenance techniques or technologies out there. Some of them we have done and do frequently. So one riprap is just throwing some stone riprap around to stabilize a shoulder or an eroding bank. Geopolymer lining, I'll get more in depth shortly. Headwall reconstruction, there's an example of that in the lower before and after photos. These two photos are taken from about the same vantage point. We had a big rain, a big soil loss event. Many trees were felled and collapsed on top of the inlet of the pipe beneath Olympic Drive. Our Streets and Drainage Division was able to respond. They removed the trees and debris, removed the damaged inlet, the segment of the pipe that was damaged, installed some concrete blocks to create a temporary head wall and stabilize the roadway shoulder. So these things we do, the invert and joint grouting, we can fortify the inlet of a pipe on the upper right-hand side. You can see kind of a concrete paving that was applied to ensure that all of the stormwater is being conveyed into the pipe and not around it. And before we get into the lining option, it's a more specialized technology that we'll talk about, but we look at certain criteria for different culverts to decide if rehab would be a good application for that site. So some of those things we look at are high replacement cost, total culvert length. So if it's a longer length, it'll drive up cost, more materials. Could be special site constraints. If the culvert is located very deep beneath the roadway, it makes for traditional open cut replacement to be quite complicated. And then we look at if the culvert system is already adequately conveying enough water. So if it's, in all of our conceptual cost estimates, we decide, okay, this location, we need to increase the size of the pipe when we replace it. This location, it's already the right size, but it's just rusting out. So maybe that could be a good candidate for rehab. If the culvert system has only minor soil loss or minor deflection, it's not completely structurally bad, then we can perhaps rehab it. And lastly, if it's accommodating of aquatic organism passage, there's many situations where the pipe size is too small, it's forcing the water out at very high velocities, and that's very erosive, those high energy outlets, and that can create a situation where the water is waterfalling over the edge of the outfall of the pipe, and it's above the stream bed elevation, and it creates a habitat segmentation threat. So we want to ensure that if we're rehabbing, then it's still not going to create a big problem for the site. So talked about the geopolymer lining option. It's a slightly more specialized technique. We've been in discussion with a company that specializes in a technology where they spray apply or hand apply this polymer lining. The lining is fully structural and it's corrosion resistant, so it is going to prolong the service life of a pipe where it was applied quite considerably, 25 to 50 years. It's a common situation across the country that we see here in our county, where these pipes are, they're rusty, they're metal, they're corroding, they're collapsing, and this type of application could be a really good option for us to spread funding for what may help replace one large project. It could spread the funding across many different projects.
That says, it said on there that by doing this, it would provide another 50 years of service. Is that correct?
That is what the company claims, and there's several case studies that they've provided that we as staff are confident in. They do provide an engineered solution, so it's not just some company selling a product. They do stand by it, and it is fully structural and corrosion resistant, and that's a big reason why it does extend the life much longer than some of the other less intensive rehab methods. So talk about some of the costs of what that rehabilitative lining would look like. Using those criteria that I mentioned earlier, staff has gone through our list of pipes in our program and kind of assessed each situation using those criteria to figure out which might be best candidates for rehabilitation. And we've come down to these 6 projects listed here. You can see that their pipe lengths may be quite long, or maybe the pipe diameters are quite large. And so you see that reflected in the conceptual cost, which is the red column, and the difference between fully replacing those and using the purple cost, which is the quote from the company to do this lining process. That lining is just over $2 million. If we were to expend that $2 million, we would reduce the replacement projects remaining in the list to 39. We would extend the serviceable life of those rehabilitated culverts, again, 25 to 50 years. And the estimated replacement cost for the remaining projects in the program would be a little less than $20 million. And here we have a slide that kind of summarizes our funding sources and where our funds are currently. We've got our Stormwater Enterprise Fund, SPLOST 2011, TSPLOST 2018, and my fault, SPLOST 2020 and TSPLOST 2023. So those 4 funding sources, even though some of them are future funding and depending on the SPLOST tiers, as you all discussed, the program total comes out to $7.4 million. And we have a couple of different options here ahead of us because of the bipartisan infrastructure law and potential grant funding coming down our way. So we've broken it up using the current and future fund totals. We have $7.46 million. If we subtracted out the cost of the proposed rehabilitative lining cost, which was $2 million, we'd be left with $5.4 million in our total program funds. The leftover funds, we have 5 projects that are listed out there with some, cost estimates for full replacements. Those 5 projects are in various levels of design and are near shovel ready if the grant application comes and we're able to put those on there. We could use that $5.4 million potentially as local match funds for a grant application. Other things we have on our minds for that $5.4 million is potential for emergency failure, as you mentioned earlier, Commissioner Davenport, and the federal grant opportunities listed here. I believe the next slide talks about, a coming slide talks about that. So here's a future program snapshot of what the program list would look like if we were to have knocked out those 5 projects that were listed for upcoming need for replacement, and also those 6 projects that are being proposed by staff for the rehab. The remaining projects would total to $16 million. And again, that $16 million is the replacement cost estimate. It does include a 20% contingency. So here's more on the bipartisan infrastructure law and a grant program that was created, kind of rebranded from an older grant program that already existed. But the Department of Transportation should be announcing a notice of funding opportunity, they've said, in the summer of 2022. So we hope to know soon. Once it comes out, staff will be pursuing replacement funding for design and construction for our most critical culverts on the list. And we know that it will likely require or be an option to put forth local match funds. And again, that's where we have that decision to make coming up. And some earlier questions, this slide might help with some of them. The Stormwater Advisory Committee was put forth by the Mayor and Commission in 2021. They've been working to review the current stormwater level of service and the associated funding level that goes along with that. They will be coming forth in early 2023 with some recommendations that they're putting together, some recommendations for potential changes to level of service and the funding levels that would coordinate with those changes. So if you wanted to have this level of service, how much money would that require? Yes.
Okay, so you have to change the acronym SWAC because we got Solid Waste Advisory Committee.
Oh, that may have just been some. Yeah, I can easily do that.
I'm very proud.
Steven and Suki.
Yeah, well done.
Although Rivers Alive might let us know that there's a solid waste overlap there.
So next steps before we have time for questions for Stephen and Ronnie, there'll be an agenda item coming forth in the October meeting for 5 action items related to this presentation, mostly relating to the new priorities list that is kind of updated from the 2021, so just updating that one, approving the 45 project concepts, authorizing staff to develop preliminary construction plans for those 45 projects, and approving preliminary plans for the rehabilitation of those proposed 6 locations. And lastly, authorizing mayor and appropriate staff to execute a contract with the company Vortex Lining Systems. They are kind of nice. They've got this contract with HGAC. It's a cooperative. Many different municipalities around the state have utilized this contract where you kind of you can bypass the bid process to work with them. And then secondly, the upcoming federal grant program for culvert replacements and the Stormwater Advisory Committee's work session presentation coming in the new year.
Jason, is there any sense of the approximate scale of federal funds that we could receive?
So the program mentioned here is allocated $1 billion for the culverts. It's a feeling amongst staff that that is not nearly a drop in the bucket for the nation. We do, similarly to Commissioner Myers mentioned earlier in the night about feeling prepared for a grant application with all the work that AIM has done. We feel pretty solidly prepared with all of our prioritization, our monitoring systems that we have in place, and our lists. We've gone back to 2018 and have been inspecting these culverts, some even before that. So we're hopeful, but it is a big need across the country. So
Looking forward to hearing more. Jesse and Carol?
Two questions. One is, this might be more an attorney question, but I don't know if this is something that y'all have already talked about before I got on here. But when the advisory committee is discussing the stormwater fee, and I know something that like I personally support actually would be us increasing that fee a bit, because it's a way for us to get institutions that don't pay property taxes to contribute significantly. Is there a way for us to exempt people of a certain income or property value, like exempting low-income people, or if this floating homestead exemption that's on the ballot in November, if that passes, like if people who qualified for that could be exempted from the stormwater fee? Is that something we're legally able to do?
We'd have to ask Attorney Drake on that.
Okay. I don't know if that's something colleagues would also be interested in exploring as an option, but my understanding is the people that are most burdened by a stormwater fee tend to be people who are particularly low income, and if there's a way to alleviate the burden on them while still getting some revenue, that might be helpful. The other question I had was about the funding slide. Is that figure that's given what's collected in a single year or over a certain number of years? Specifically the 1.1 million in stormwater enterprise capital funds.
So that 1.1 is currently what's in the account.
Okay.
But every year, we aim for about 200,000 being added to that in our capital request. In the past couple of years, because we have excess fund balance, we're able to ask for more of that. So in the last couple of years, it's been closer to 600,000 or 700,000 that we're getting each year in an enterprise fund. But I would say that's not all just for live stream pipe replacements, right? So a lot of it's for the MS4 permit that we have, some of the other capital, stormwater capital programs, mapping, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, so generally, most, if not all, of the stormwater fee goes for the maintenance and mapping and testing and things of that nature. Director Bailey's point is that we've had some excess and we've been able to deploy that on some of these emergencies and capital projects that we have. I would like to share this too, if I might. So both proud and concerned of our stormwater efforts, and just some history here. Back in the beginning of around 2000 or so, 2001, 2002, there was a master plan of the stormwater needs. And Jason alluded to this when he was talking. There's really two types of stormwater aspects that you need to pay attention to. One's velocity and one's quality. And in those master plans, there were a number of projects on both, the quantity, velocity, and the quality aspects that were identified across the county. And you will remember the flooding on Baxter Street, the flooding in some of these neighborhoods. It was, people are amazed when they move to Athens with all the topography. And what I'm proud to say is that, unlike a lot of other counties, Jason said, well, this is a nationwide crisis, and that's exactly true. But through diligence and the commission continuing to put resources behind it and SPLOST funds in the past, we've tackled a lot of the really big, ugly quantity projects. And now we're sort of moving into the quality stage. And so the figures that are being shared with you tonight don't include that at all. And so that's a whole nother capital ask as we continue. But, being one of the smallest county in Georgia and being ahead of the curve on infrastructure life cycle, we're doing good, but there's a lot more yet to do. Is that fair, y'all?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Carol?
I guess my follow-up was, we're limited in the federal funds that we can apply for by the 20% match, right? So, I wasn't, when you were going through that one slide, it wasn't clear to me what was left over for the match?
Right, so we'll have to deter, so that 7.46 is how much money we have right now within current and future
Okay.
tiers of SPLOST and TSPLOST. If we assume that you all would be behind us going with the rehab lining for some of those projects upcoming, that's $2 million. So that 5.39 is what we would have left potentially for grant match.
Okay. And do we have any idea when those announcements will be made?
I don't think anything passed. They said summer 2022, which is right now. So nothing more definite than that.
Oh, so we've already put in the grant?
No. Their announcement for the notice of funding opportunity should be, we think, any day now.
Oh, okay. You're waiting for it to
That's right.
start. So we
That's right.
don't obviously know when they're gonna announce on that. The other thing was on the failed to critical to poor condition. Is there any standard way of thinking about how long it goes from one to the next to the next?
So
Yeah, in terms of time.
and honestly, what we found is some of them that are maybe in the fair condition today might be the ones that fail next. We just, we really don't know which one is,
Okay.
it's a guess in a lot of cases. The best we can do is put together, a data-driven approach to rating them and try and fix them before that happens.
And the final question was back to this stormwater, the fee. Is that in our schedule to review? Upcoming schedule, mayor, manager?
In 2023,
In 2023, the year 2023?
the year 2023.
Not the fiscal
Not
year.
the fiscal year.
Okay, but not at that's next year. Is that before budget time next year or after budget time next year?
I'm not sure.
I would hope before budget time. I'm hoping it's spring,
Okay.
early 2023 that we can get this back in front of you so that hopefully we can have some considerations for the FY24 budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. And going back to the evaluation, lettering the scores. So like, if we move this first, I'll just say this program that you're talking about doing with the Culvert Rehabilitation. I mean, I'm fully in support of it. I'm excited to see that as an option moving forward. With the money left over, would we be then prioritizing towards those failed? Because me just kind of adding up numbers here in my head a little bit. Looks like the money we have right now available would be able to cover all of the other failed projects, plus dip into some of the critical projects. Is that the way that we go about it? Or?
That would be the hope, unless between now and then something else rises, to the top
Sure.
of the list. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll just say, I think throughout this entire presentation here, it just shows, I think, how creative TPW and staff has been in dealing with too small of a budget that we've given you. So I commend y'all on that. And just really impressed by how y'all kept on finding ways to take care of the community. So thanks
I
for that.
appreciate that, and it really does bring up the idea that there's that idea of cost of ownership with infrastructure, right? And the formula behind that is how much money do we need every year to make sure that we're sustainably funding, the infrastructure that we've got. And if you can't affect the budget, right? If you can't affect the amount you've got, that there's still two things you can do. You can try and find ways to extend the life of what's out there, or you can try and find value engineering to lower the cost of that replacement. And those are the two things we're trying to do with the resources that we've got available.
Great job.
Jesse?
Yeah, speaking of doing a lot with little, my understanding is that TPW is among the departments that's been especially suffering from staff shortages, and I'm just curious if there's an update perhaps at all on if or how things are improving on that front. Because if we're talking about, for example, a potential alternative to save funding is to put more of this on staff, I mean, that might be a non-starter too if we're lacking people.
Well, I think the fact that y'all brought this forward, we're comfortable, the rehab is something that we would contract out. You've got a quote for it. We want to see if you're interested in that to stabilize some of the pipes before they become emergencies. And I appreciate you inquiring and concerned about that. Multiple departments, just like everywhere else, are chronically understaffed at this point. So I do appreciate your consideration on that.
And that is the one thing I thought, and I'm not at all against, looking at the cost of what it would be to take some of more of this in-house, right? What's the equipment that we would need? What's the expertise we would need? The very first thing is the bodies that we need. I think streets and drainage is still at about 30% vacancies. And right now, they have almost enough workers to do the maintenance cycles, but we'd have to, we really have to find people before we could create a capital projects crew. And so always open to creative ways to drive that up.
Are we stagnated at 30%, or is that up or down from?
It's better than it was a few months ago, but we're still seeing kind of, as soon as we get a new person in, there's been a revolving door, outward as well, so.
Do we participate in any training programs with like Athens-Tech or Classic City High or anything to get some of these young people into this field?
We do work with universities. One of the things is so our heavy equipment license, driving licenses is something that we do, CDL training.
Yeah, I know we do CDL.
But as far as kind of other expertise, I don't know that we've explored that with, some of the things that we usually rely on contractors for. That would have to be part of the consideration if we looked at doing something like this more in-house.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be, maybe we could offer opportunities to folks who maybe have a hard time finding, good, well-paid work.
Sure.
Through some of our other programs.
Y'all, thanks so much for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Glad for
you.
what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you all for your time.
All right.
Good job, Jason.
Everybody have a great night. Thank you so much.